Good afternoon, delegates. Welcome to the orientation program organized for you for the third Hague conference. Chairpersons Srinjoy Shrimani and Kushan Mitra will guide you through this orientation ceremony by going through all the nitty-gritties of this committee, explaining all the details of procedure and any other details that you need to know. Over the course of this video, if you have any questions or any doubts regarding the committee, please make sure you post it as a comment on the YouTube channel itself. Please remember, you need to be logged in with your Google account or a YouTube account to post comments. If these comments are within the duration of this video, which is within 4 o'clock, the chairpersons will address the orientation program organized for you for the third Hague conference. Apart from that, if you want to send in any more questions after 4 o'clock, you will have to send it in by other means such as social media. You can use email. You can even post through the Facebook page, and they will get back to you as soon as possible. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Srinjoy Shrimani and Kushan Mitra to continue with this orientation program. Thank you.
Welcome, delegates, to the orientation session for the third Hague conference. So this is Kushan Mitra, my co-chair, and I'm Srinjoy Shrimani. The first thing that I'd like to do is introduce our executive board to you. So here we have Devang Maskara, who's our director, and we have Farhad Islam, our another member of our executive board. Joybi Datta Gupta is not present here at the moment. So the first thing that I'd like to talk about is procedure itself, and we will follow the basic format that is followed in any MUNs. So we start with a normal motion to open debate, and then we have a motion to set agenda, after which we move into the GSLs. So for all those who don't know, GSLs are basically statements where countries come up one by one and give out their policies, and it's just a formal way of letting the other delegates know what your stance is for the particular topic. And for a GSL, what we usually do is we motion for opening a GSL, and we only specify the time per speaker. Unlike moderated caucuses and unmoderated caucuses, we do not specify how much time the total GSL session will take. So now Kushan will tell you about mod caucus and unmod caucus.
Yes, Alex. Now, deviating from formal debate, we move into informal debate, which takes place in the form of moderated caucuses. Now, moderated caucuses, unlike the general speakers list, focuses on a very particular part of the topic on the whole. So delegates, after the general speakers list has been established, the chairpersons will ask for any motions. The delegate will raise a motion to open a moderated caucus, specifying the topic of the moderated caucus, the time speaker for each delegate, and the total time speaker for the entire moderated caucus. Now, the moderated caucuses, as we told you, focuses on a very, very specific part of debate, which is why we need you to research on the entire basic topics which have been covered in the study guide. We further even suggest you to go on to other topics so that we can broaden the scope of debate in committee, and this will enhance much more topics, and this will allow us to cover many more topics throughout the course of committee.
Now, coming to what unmoderated caucuses are, unmoderated caucuses in MUNs are something, an unmoderated caucus is a very essential tool which can be used to great advantage by a delegate. Now, an unmoderated caucus is an informal session where delegates are allowed to get up from their chairs, and the executive board is not going to view what goes on in committee at that time. The delegates are able to move freely within committee and interact with the other with the other delegates, garner support. Basically, this is the time that the delegates use for lobbying, and this is very essential when it comes down to voting for paperwork, whether it be in the format of working papers or the final resolutions. Now, the next thing we come to are points. So in our committee, we'll have three kinds of points. We'll have points of orders, points of personal privileges, and points of parliamentary inquiry. Now, there is the points of orders are something which differ from from MUN to MUN, from committee to committee. But the format we will apply for points of orders is that it will only and only be in the form of chits. And basically, a point of order is nothing but a factual inaccuracy. Basically, if you notice that another delegate in his speech has said something which is not true, remember that a point of order does not have to do with personal opinion. It is only a factual inaccuracy. Then what the delegate is expected to do is write out and point out what that factual inaccuracy is and send it to the executive board. Now, coming to what points of parliamentary inquiry is, Kushan will elaborate on that.
Now, points of parliamentary inquiry are in order when the floor is open. Points of parliamentary inquiry are basically questions regarding procedure of committee. In case the delegate has any queries regarding how committee will proceed, in order as to what procedure the delegate should follow, that should come to the board in the form of a point of parliamentary inquiry.
Now,
another point that we have is a point of personal privilege.
Now, points of personal privilege are something which every delegate has, and this is the only form of points which can be used by a delegate to interrupt another speaker. Although we highly recommend that unless it is absolutely necessary, no delegate interrupt another speaker's speech. But points of personal privileges are used to highlight this personal discomfort that the delegate is facing at that point of time. If the delegate cannot hear what the speech is, if the delegate wants a point to be repeated, or even if the delegate is feeling uncomfortable with the room temperature at that point of time, if they want the AC to be switched on and off, all of this comes in the form of points of personal privileges, which can be raised, which is going to be printed on the other side of the placard that every delegate is going to receive, and that just has to be raised even if someone else is speaking. It is, as I repeat, it's the only point which can interrupt a speaker. Now, the next thing we'd like to talk about are yields. So,
yes, right. Now yields come in the focus during the general speakers list. Now, say suppose a delegate has a 2-minute speaking time, and he finishes his speech with a certain amount of period left. That amount of period can hence be utilized during committee in the form of 3 ways. The first is a yield to another delegate. In this, what happens is another delegate in the committee will come up and use that 30 seconds or 15 seconds, the time left, in order to express his views on that very basic speech. Another form of yield which takes place is a yield to points of information. This is when the delegate would like to have questions raised to the speech which he has just placed before committee. And we also have a yield to the chair, where the chairperson utilizes the time which has been given.
The yield to the chair is something that a delegate uses when, for example, if his GSL speech is for 2 minutes, but he's utilized only 1.5, and he doesn't require that this remaining 30 seconds, and he does not want to yield it to another delegate, or he doesn't want to be questioned on his speech, all he has to do is yield the time to the chair, and the chair can use it to save committee time and further the progress of the committee really quickly. Now, the next thing we'd like to talk about, we'll jump straight into what paperwork is. Okay, no, actually, before we do that, what we'd like to remind everyone is that our committee is going to be simulated on 16th of May 1915, which is 100 years back from the day the day our actual conference begins, and it is a point which is in the middle of World War III. So, I beg your pardon, World War I. There's been a lot of confusion regarding historic committees. Now, one very, very important thing that you have to realize for historic committees is that you cannot bring any references into the picture which have occurred at a future time. You cannot bring any references of, let's say, 1916, 1917, 1918. You do not at this point in time know who won World War I, because at that point in time, World War I is still on. And remember that at the end of the day, our committee is still a peace conference. And the objective of our committee is to cease the war as soon as possible and not to continue war. What we'd really like to make very clear is that we as the executive board will not look favorably upon communiques or basically upon delegates who are wishing to, who wish to actually continue the war rather than look to stop the war at an earlier point in time.
At the same time, delegates, we would ask you to maintain your country policy, and that there are several countries which have declared war, and we expect them to maintain that level of country policy, but at the same time maintain that diplomatic responsibility which we expect them to have during committee. And as Srinjoy has already mentioned out, this is a Hague Peace Conference, and at the same time, our sole objective is to find a solution to World War I. Now, delegates, we would again like to resume with giving you with normal procedure regarding paperwork. Now, delegates, paperwork takes place in the form of 4 methods usually. One is a resolution, a directive, a working paper, and communiques. As for this committee, we will not be using any draft directives. We will be using draft resolutions, working papers, and communiques. Now, Srinjoy will just explain to you how communiques are going to be used in committee, as there were several questions that were being asked regarding the use of communiques.
Okay, so communiques. Now, again, I spoke about how important unmoderated caucuses are for delegates, how well they can utilize this. Another very, very important tool that every delegate possesses in this committee is something known as a communique. Now, what a communique is what the delegate is doing with the communique is he or she is communicating a piece of information about his country or a certain occurrence that has happened to either the executive board or to another member. Now, communiques can be used effectively by delegates to alter the course of debate in the way they wish it to happen. Now, one thing that they have to realize is that at the end of the day, every communique will not hold true in committee unless it has been ratified by the board. Therefore, the executive board will really favorably look upon communiques which are innovative, yes, but to the extent that they are still logical and practical. And I mean, we've seen cases in previous MUNs where we've had communiques come up where people just say, I wish to bomb the Kremlin, the United States government wishes to bomb the Kremlin. We will not be favorably looking upon such communiques. Now, going into the semantics about communiques, you have two kinds of public communiques and you have private communiques. Now, let me highlight the difference between the two. As by their name, private communiques are communiques which are pieces of information which are restrictive, which stay only between the delegate who has written it and the executive board. Now, a public communique, on the other hand, is a communique which, once ratified by the board, will be told to committee. The committee will be informed about the communique and what is written inside it. So yeah, I think that covers whatever we have about communiques. However, if we, during the course of this orientation, if we receive more questions about this, the communiques, we will love to answer them. Now, coming to working papers.
Yes. Now, delegates' working papers are, in a sense, just ideas which the delegates would like to put up during committee in order for committee to elaborate upon such ideas which will act as solutions to end the war. Now, delegates' working papers do not follow a strict format like draft resolutions. In working papers, we will specify a number of authors and the number of signatories to the working paper. After that, the delegates can just list down and jot down the points which they want to bring forth in committee for committee to discuss and elaborate upon for the due course of time. And working papers, as mentioned, do not need to follow any form of formatting. They can be just written down as points which we should discuss.
Now, working papers are used in times of such as, it's not the final paperwork which has been, it's not something that is binding on all countries, but it's something that is used as a framework for the final draft resolution. So, for example, if you have a long session of debate on the second day in the first session, you can utilize all the points that you have garnered during the course of that debate and formulate one working paper which you pass at the end of that session. And then you can use the points in that working paper for the final draft resolution which you're going to put up. Now, I think we can start talking about the draft resolution. Now, for all those who don't know, a draft resolution is the final segment of our Model United Nations Conference. It is the goal that all of us are moving towards. Now, once once the draft resolution passes, committee passes. And if the draft resolution fails, if there is not a single draft resolution which passes, then committee fails. Now, what we need to realize is that unlike working papers, there can only be one draft resolution which can be passed. Once a draft resolution has been passed in committee, committee ends then and there. So we need to have signatories, and we need to have authors. Now, what authors are the people who actually formulate the points in the draft resolution. They are the ones who have worked with the other delegates and they have formulated the points one by one. It is their original points which they have come up with. And the signatories are simply those people who wish to discuss the draft resolution in committee. Now, a normal misconception that normally crops up is that people can assume that someone who is a signatory to a resolution is automatically supporting that resolution, but that is not true. Someone who is a signatory to a resolution is simply wanting to put that resolution up for debate. So
now, delegates, regarding the procedure of resolution, we will be pretty much stringent regarding the procedure. We will be allowing a bit of allow a bit of freedom in certain cases, but we will specify them to you in committee. Now, delegates, firstly, I need to remind you that pre-written resolutions are not allowed, and therefore all resolutions that will be submitted to the executive board need to be written during the 3 days of committee. Now,
at the end of the day, you are coming to this MUN not with ideas that you have garnered from before, but you need to utilize the ideas that you have obtained during the course of debate on the 3 days, and that is what we expect to see. So be rather unhappy to see points that have never come up in committee but are suddenly there on the draft resolution on the final day. That is something we are very much against. Another, which brings me to another point, plagiarism. Now, this is something that is nothing but a form of cheating. You cannot have plagiarized resolutions in committee. You cannot have resolutions which you found on the internet. And if anyone is found to have plagiarized any form of resolution, he or she will automatically be debarred from winning any awards in this committee. This has happened before in LMCMUN, and it will continue to happen in the future as well. So let's discuss how to now ways of discussing.
Delegates, we would like to just once clarify to you the procedure of resolutions. Although it is up on the conference handbook, we have been receiving several questions regarding the exact procedure. Now, delegates, we will now, after you write the authors and the signatories of the resolution, we have the preambulatory clauses. The preambulatory clauses, as specified in the conference handbook, act as mere introductions to the entire topic. They act as references to several charters or to several conventions which have been used in the past, or any treaty which has been signed in the past, which is being referred to committee's attention. After the preambulatory clauses have been written, we have the operative clauses. Now, the operative clauses need to be numbered serial-wise. You may have sub-clauses. Now, the main function of the operative clauses is that it specifies the due course of action which committee has decided to take. That is exactly what the operative clauses are. And for further information, we would like you to go to the conference handbook to just download the conference handbook, where the draft resolution clearly specifies the exact formatting. So, delegates, we would now like to move on to the voting procedure regarding paperwork.
Okay, no, before that, we need to discuss how to discuss resolutions. Yeah, so resolutions can be discussed in a couple of formats. You can have your normal moderated caucuses. You can have a moderated caucus on the resolution itself. The topic of a moderated caucus can be the resolution itself. The next thing, you can have question answer sessions. So, for example, you allot, let's say, 15 minutes to a particular resolution for discussion, and the authors then of that resolution come up to the podium and are asked questions based on the points that are present on their resolution by the other delegates, which they need to answer. And then you have things such as 1 for 1 against and 2 for 2 against, and so on. So 1 for 1 against is when you have one person speaking for the resolution and one person speaking against the resolution. And similarly, when it's a 2 for 2 against, it's 2 people for and 2 people against. Now, this is a great way to garner votes. Now, 1 for 1 against and 2 for 2 against is when you have people from, let's say, one block, let's say the Germany block, for example, speaking for their resolution. On the other hand, you have someone from, let's say, the UK block coming up and talking against the resolution and proving to committee why their resolution should not be passed, and maybe why their resolution should be passed. Now, these are very essential. These methods that I have spoken about are very essential in garnering votes. At the end of the day, you have to realize that a large part of your performance in committee is decided by your performance on the final day as well. The final day, the resolution discussion and the resolution passing is also very essential when it comes to your awards.
So now, yeah, we would also be having amendments to resolutions. Yeah. Now, amendments take place in mostly two manners. One is called a friendly amendment. Secondly is an unfriendly amendment. What it basically is that when a delegate looks at a certain resolution and he finds certain mistakes, or whether he wants to better it. So what he does is, on a piece of paper, he submits an amendment to the executive board. Before that, he refers it to the authors of the resolution, asking them that if they are okay with the amendment which he wants to introduce in committee. If the authors of that particular resolution are in fact okay with the amendment which the delegate would like to bring up, then it is taken as a friendly amendment, and that clause is added or deleted, or as specified in the amendment, in the draft resolution itself. However, if the authors object to the amendment which the delegate has brought up, then that amendment will be given to the executive board. Amendments usually take place by either adding a clause, deleting a clause, or modifying a clause on the whole. Amendments which will be submitted to the executive board via chit also have to be in the same format as specified in the draft resolution. We will be further details of regarding how we are going to judge and vote upon the amendments will be specified to the delegates during committee. But now I guess we would like to just move on to the entire voting procedure of the resolutions.
Okay, let me describe the difference between voting for working papers and voting for resolutions. Remember, communiques are something that are pieces of paperwork which are not voted upon, which the passing of communiques relies solely on the discretion of the executive board. Now, regarding working papers, you simply have a simple majority. So if you have more than 50% of the committee voting for a working paper, that working paper is automatically accepted. It is passed. But what you have to remember, it is not binding. It is not necessary. Now we come to the final the draft resolution. Now, draft resolution voting happens in a procedure known as formal voting. Now, formal voting is, which brings me actually to the back to the point of attendance. When you are during the first day of committee, you are going to be asked for your attendance. Now, there are two things that you can say. I mean, I'm assuming that you won't be saying absent. You can say present, and you can say present and voting. Now, when you say present and voting, it means that on the final day of the resolution, you cannot abstain from voting. You have to have either a yes or a no for each and every resolution. And for someone who says present, he has the option. He has the option of saying abstain. Abstaining from voting for a resolution is given to that person. Now,
also delegates, whenever you give your attendance as present and voting on one day, for the remaining days of committee, you will be marked as present and voting. You will not be able to change your attendance. However, if you mark yourself as present on the first day, then you will be given the permission to change your attendance roll call to present and voting during the second or the third day of committee.
Okay, I think one of the things that we forgot, which Farhad pointed out to me, was something known as the SSL. Now, let's take a hypothetical example where there is an emergency situation in committee. There is a situation which is cropped up. And what happens then is that we open something known as the SSL, or the special speakers list. Now, this is something which is very similar to the GSL. Now, the format of the SSL is the same as the GSL, just that now there is a little more perspective to this. Now, in an SSL, you will be solely talking about your country's stance relating to that particular emergency, and maybe if you have enough time, what your solutions are for this. And wait, for SSLs, yeah, you do not have yields for SSLs, because at the end of the day, when it comes to an emergency, you have a time crunch, and you need to resolve the situation as soon as possible. Now, unlike other committees, we will not be having draft directives to resolve emergencies if we have one, but that will be done with working papers themselves. So I've already explained what working papers are, and I think that covers mostly everything regarding procedure. Now, I think we'll look at the questions that we have received over the course of debate. Okay, course of this hangout. So the first one is the format of communiques. Now, regarding format of communiques, first thing that you need to do, you need to write to whom. You need to mention whether it is to the executive board or is it to another delegate via the executive board. That needs to be mentioned very explicitly. Then you need to mention the country that is sending it, that is your country from. Then you need to specify whether it is a public communique or a private communique. After those things have been done, the next thing you do is that you write down what your communique basically is, what course of action your country is taking, or what piece of information have you obtained which you want to make committee privy to. So yeah, the next question. If he comes after the roll call. Okay, what does a delegate need to do if he comes after the roll call? It is advised that the delegate be there before the roll call. But if a delegate does come after the roll call, he needs to send in, say whether he's present or voting via a chit to the executive board.
Now, delegates, regarding the attire on the second day, it has been specified on the conference handbook that you can wear formals or Indian on either of the 3 days of committee. So you may choose to wear Indian on the second day, or you may choose to wear Western formals on the second day. Now, delegates, the per speaker time for special speakers list will be specified by the delegate who motions for the special speakers list. So there is no exact time which is being specified for an SSL. That will be specified by the delegate who brings up that motion itself.
Now, the next question is, do we have points of information during moderated caucuses? No, delegates. We have seen in past MUNs that having points of information during moderated caucuses just leads to more disruption rather than formal debate. And whatever questions or points you have regarding speeches made during the moderated caucuses can be addressed during your speech, your next speech. And however, if we notice that at the end of the day, a lot of these the procedure is subject to change, and if we have, let's say, something as gaping as a minute left in a for a delegate to complete a speech, maybe then we can have points of information allowed. But as of now, for basic procedure, we do not have points of information. Questions? Okay, yeah. So let's talk about the topic.
Let's move on to the topic. Now, delegates, as Srinja has already told you, our committee is an historic committee. Now, what that basically means is that you have to pretend that you are on 16th May 1915. You are moved 100 years behind. You are moved a century back, and you have to pretend that whatever events that happened after the 16th of May 1915 is not known to you. All that information which you bring up in committee has to be all the events and information which has been before 16th of May 1915. Now, delegates, as we know, that the World War I erupted after several major conflicts around the world, led to the political tensions which eventually led to certain countries declaring war against each other. Now, as we move into the study guide, we talk to you about the German unification and how the unification of all these countries garnered the entire nationalism process, which begged for these countries to gain a stronghold in the world scenario. And that is exactly the grassroots of several political tensions which erupted during the next few years. Now, delegates understand that our committee is going to be held in 16th May 1915, which is going to be 8 months after the war has already taken place. Now, delegates, you will be seated in this conference as a last resort to gain peace. Several attempts were made beforehand, however, they failed. The Hague Peace Conference of 1915 was, in fact, scheduled for that year, but it was postponed due to the war that was being waged. However, finally, we have rescheduled it and given one last chance for delegates to come up with innovative solutions and to mold their solutions during the time of 1915 and present us with a very good solution to end World War I. Now, delegates, we have received a question regarding the Italian alliance with Russia. Now, delegates understand that all secret treaties will be kept secret, and as of 16th May 1915, there were several secret documents which were not revealed, and therefore we need to abide by that. We need to follow that, and has to know is that as of now, any secret alliance between Italy and perhaps any other country is not known to us or the other members of the executive board. Now, delegates, we also have to tell you about what we expect you to tackle during this entire committee, the very basic topics which we would ask you to debate during committee. Now, we would firstly like to talk to you about how this entire war started. We would expect you to come up and discuss on how this war, if not prevented, how it can be prevented now, how the already waging wars that are taking place. We have the battle of the Ypres. We have the Lusitania sinking, which has been going on, and we need to understand that such disastrous events are still taking place, and in order to curb them, we need to come up with proper solutions. Now, delegates, we would also like you to focus on the entire international law which did exist during that point of time. For this, you need to refer to the first and the second Hague Conventions, which were signed in 1899.
And also remember that something that has become sort of a trend in MUNs nowadays is just citing international law and expecting to win points. But remember, at the end of the day, we do not expect you to work exactly like diplomats. We know at the end of the day that you are still school children. And at the end of the day, we are looking for logical explanations and logical reasoning, and not just hearing what your knowledge regarding international law is. And okay, some other topics that we will be looking to discuss are, of course, the humanitarian situations in specific countries, how they have been hit by the war, the economic conditions in specific countries. We'd prefer that, since this is a peace conference, that the accusations which are normally MUNs in Calcutta strife within normally that's what happens in most MUNs. We prefer that delegates restrain themselves from just accusing other delegates and actually come up with constructive solution through the 3 days of debate. Now, at this point, I think we take a break and wait for some more questions.
1, 2, 3, and action.
Yeah, hi delegates.
Now,
So
delegates, we have received
some-
certain questions from the delegates. Now, the first question was regarding whether there will be any usage of laptops during committee. Now, delegates, as specified in the conference handbook, again, there will be no usage of any electronic gadgets during committee. No laptops and no internet. However, during unmoderated caucuses, you will be allowed to use laptops and the internet. And the delegate, if you may also use the point of personal privilege to excuse yourself, and you may use the laptop outside committee, but within committee, it is strictly forbidden. Now, we also have a question regarding the dress attire, which has already been specified. Delegates, you can wear either Indian formals or Western formals on either of the 3 days.
Now, another thing that I'd like to talk about is the right to reply. Now, this is something that delegates really confused. Now, a right to reply is more, it's more on the side of being a procedural part of committee rather than being something that is going to help debate as such. A right to reply is when a delegate has been personally insulted or offended by another delegate. Then the delegate can get up and claim that he has a right to reply. He has a right to reply and expect an apology from the other delegate. So another thing is that in our committee, unlike the LMCMUN policy, we do not have challenges. The challenges have and never will be a part of LMCMUN procedure. And the next question is, how would the board look upon changes in country policy? Now, very important part is of an MUN is that we as delegates have the responsibility to strictly adhere to our country policies and always be on the lookout for the best interests of our own country before any others. Yes, at the end of the day, we are here for world peace, but if a delegate is achieving world peace at the risk of compromising the security or the goodwill of his own country, that will not be looked favorably upon. However, during certain situations, maybe in emergency situations, there may arise situations where delegates may be forced to change their country policy. Remember, only when the delegate is forced to change his or her country policy will they be expected to do so, and then the delegate will not be penalized. However, this again differs from situation to situation, so the marking regarding country policy will be given accordingly. Now, the next question was regarding the mandate.
Now, delegates understand that all specifications regarding mandate will be done in the resolution. However, we would not like to specify it now, as there is no need to give you further details on the mandate, as we've already told you that resolutions need to be written during committee. Such questions regarding mandate will be also answered to you during committee, so that it will help you better when you write resolutions. Delegates, do not worry. To specify the mandate, you might just have to add one simple clause. We will specify how and when to bring it up in committee. Now, delegates, we would also like to first, now we got a question regarding the voting rights of certain countries, such as the Permanent Court of Arbitration. Now, delegates understand we have certain other,
The Red Cross as well.
we have certain other countries, certain portfolios such as the Red Cross, the Permanent Court of Arbitration, and the Emirate of Jabal Shamar. Now, although these are not sovereign states, we have called them due to the influence they have on the world community and the effect that they can bring up during committee itself. Now, delegates understand that although Red Cross, PCA, and the Emirate of Jabal Shamar will not be having any formal voting during the resolutions, they will still hold a great amount of importance within committee. The Red Cross, as we all know, will be focusing on the entire humanitarian issues and the issues, the humanitarian and the economic issues which are prevalent in World War I, and that is what the Red Cross will be entirely focusing on. The Permanent Court of Arbitration will also be looking at this entire World War from the perspective, from the legal perspective, and offering us several views regarding regarding the legality of certain activities which or certain actions which committee would like to take.
Okay, so the next thing, talking about the number of authors and signatories for a resolution at any point in time, the maximum number of authors that we will entertain for a particular resolution will be 4. And we will not have anything known as a special signatory. And the number of signatories, the minimum number of signatories required for a resolution to be put up for discussion will be 10. And the next question was, will there be an accelerated timeline? Now, in terms of accelerated timelines, as of now, we do not have any plans of having an accelerated timeline. But if, as per the situation at that point in time, depending if there are emergency situations, we may have accelerated timelines. So it's not neither is it a yes, nor is it a no at this point in time. So, I mean, are there any more questions? Then.
All right, delegates, we have also been going through your position papers, and we have been looking at your policy statements. And we would just like to urge committee to again go on the time frame of 1915 and look into the policy that the countries had at that point in time. Now, delegates understand that we are just telling you that several countries entered the war at a later point of time, such as during 1917 or 1916. But during 1915, they had a certain country policy which is different from what they had 2 years later. And therefore, you need to ensure that you follow the country policy at that particular date and time.
Now, one more thing that I'd like to bring up is regarding the position papers that we've received. Almost everyone asked for extensions to their position papers, and they have been given. And we have not really penalized anyone much on their if they've been given. We've given extensions pretty easily to all the delegates. Now, what we will be penalizing in position papers is our factual inaccuracies and policy violations. Now, this is something that we will penalize even during committee. And we expected position papers to have to very clearly outline what the policy of that country is. It is that tool which you use to let us know exactly what your policy is, so we can expect what sort of debate, we can know what sort of debate to expect from you on the course of 3 days. And talking about factual inaccuracies in points of orders, remember that just by sending the board a horde of point of orders, you will not win awards. At the end of the day, a point of order is actually showing something negative about the person who has been accused of the factual inaccuracy, rather than actually furthering the cause of the delegate who has proposed the factual inaccuracy. However, we will take into account the fact that a delegate has clearly has been listening and has pointed out factual inaccuracy. Now, one very important aspect of an MUN is listening to what the other delegate is talking about. Remember that, yes, lobbying is very important. You need to interact with other delegates. But at the end of the day, if you are not listening to what the other delegate is talking about, if you do not give that delegate the minimum respect that is required, if you don't listen to his speeches, then it is very shameful. And that is something we will not be looking favorably upon at all.
Now, delegates, we have received a question regarding asking us what an accelerated timeline actually is. Now, delegates, although, as Srinja already said, we have no plans of what an accelerated time frame is, but the basic idea of an accelerated time frame is that committee will shift its timeline from 1915 to, let's say, 5 years down the line, let's say 1920. So it basically shifts the entire date on which committee is having its
normally accelerated timelines are accompanied by information. You are provided with information that has about things that have gone on in those 5 years. Let's say, as Kushan pointed out, 1915, and we suddenly jump to 1920. You will be told about the things that have happened during the course of those 5 years, so that your subsequent speeches and arguments will be based on those events as well. Another thing that I'd like to talk about is, at the end of the day, all the emergencies, if they do occur in a committee, is actually there to test your skill as a delegate to be innovative and actually come out of to extricate yourself out of tough and tight situations. So remember that for those looking to win high awards in this committee, that the time of the emergency is the time where you should be looking to exploit, is the time of committee that you should be looking to exploit the most, because that is the time during committee that you can earn the most points. So I've spoken about how important resolutions are as well. So
I'm sorry, delegates, there is another question regarding communiques. Now, we have already answered, but perhaps you might have missed on that. So we will explain it to you just once more. Now, delegates, understand that communiques are any form of communication between the delegate and any outside agency. It can be the executive board, it can be another delegate, or it can be any other agency. Now, delegates, the entire procedure of this communique has already been specified by Srinja, and if you could please go on to the video and look at it and look at it again, you will find your answer. But since the entire topic of communique has been brought up, I must inform you that the executive board will not be looking favorably upon you sending us communiques every minute. Delegates understand that your use of communiques needs to be perfect. You need to send in the right amount of communiques. There should not be any influx of communiques which we do not feel is required in committee. So you should choose carefully and properly how you want to use your lines of communication.
Okay, we've just received on the question saying, will there be more of crisis situations? Yes, thank you for this question. Our committee is not a constant crisis committee. Our committee is not based, it's neither a war cabinet and neither is it, nor is it a security council. At the end of the day, it is simply a peace conference, which we have been able to organize an armistice during the war where this peace conference is happening. So no, our committee will not be a constant crisis committee, and crises, even if they happen, will be kept to a bare minimum, and the delegates will be required to perform very well during those crisis situations. So do we have any more questions?
Delegates, we would urge you to ask any questions you have regarding procedure or regarding the topic we have. It would be better for you to clarify it right now. It would be better to be safe than sorry. So if you can ask us a question, we will clarify any doubts.
So we'll take another 2-3 minute break and we'll wait for further questions, and then we will wrap up. So So
Welcome back, delegates. Now we have received 2 questions. Now,
these are the 2 final questions we'll be answering. And if there are any more questions, or if you missed out any questions, feel free to message us on Facebook. I hope most of you are already part of the Facebook group. That's your forum for interacting with the delegates and also interacting with us. Facebook messages, phone calls, WhatsApp messages, all of that will be entertained. Any questions and clarifications you have, feel free to ask them before the conference and even during the conference. Okay, so we have a question about follow-ups. Basically, a plea to follow-up is something where a delegate finishes his speech, but he has not utilized his time well, so he has points remaining, which he could not complete in that time frame, and we will not entertain plea to follow-ups at all. Now, a difference between a crisis and an emergency, there essentially is no difference between a crisis and an emergency, but there is a difference between an update and an emergency. An update is something that can pop up at any point in time and does not have the same amount of urgency that an emergency has. So that answers the 2 questions, and well, I guess that brings us to the end of today's orientation. Thank you guys for coming and watching today's orientation. Thanks for all the questions. I hope everyone who had questions, I think it's
that we have been able to adequately answer.
I hope we've been able to adequately answer. We look forward to seeing all of you for the 3 days of committee, and we hope that you enjoy yourselves. And remember that at the end of the day, though this is a competition, you're here to make friends and most importantly have fun with us as well as the other delegates. We are as much human as you are. So feel free to ask us about your other interests, whether it be playing music or sports, or whether you're a Liverpool fan, or whether if you're a Man United fan, no one really cares about them. But yeah, so I think we will end over here. Thank you so much.
And delegates, if in case there is any technical glitch with the video which has been uploaded, you can always contact us. Our contact numbers have been given in the study guide itself. Thank you and best of luck for the conference.